The global balance of power just underwent a quiet but massive shift in Sydney, Australia, and it wasn't led by a superpower, but by a country that is tired of being a bystander in its own destiny. While the headlines are rightfully dominated by the thunder of airstrikes in the Middle East, something arguably more permanent is happening in the corridors of diplomacy. Prime Minister Mark Carney just stood before the Lowy Institute and effectively declared that the era of relying on a single indispensable ally is over. For decades, the world operated on a simple, albeit comfortable, fiction that there was a rules-based order protected by the United States that benefited everyone. But as Carney pointed out with brutal honesty, that order hasn't just frayed, it has ruptured. To understand why this matters, you have to look at the numbers that nobody is talking about. We are taught to think of the world as a battle between giants, the US versus China. But there is a third force emerging that is actually larger than both. If you combine the economies of Canada, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union, you are looking at a collective GDP that is significantly larger than that of the United States, and a trading volume that is triple that of China. This is the Middle Power Coalition, and they are finally starting to realize that they don't have to choose between two masters. They can choose themselves. The catalyst for this sudden urgency was the events of late February 2026. When the United States and Israel launched strikes against Iran, they did so with a total disregard for the very international system they helped build. They didn't consult the United Nations, and they didn't even give a courtesy call to their closest NATO allies, including Canada. This was the moment the mask fell off. It proved that in the current era, great powers will act entirely without constraint, leaving middle powers like Canada to deal with the fallout, whether that's regional instability, spiked energy prices, or the risk of a broader global conflict. Carney's response in Australia was a masterclass in what he calls value-based realism. He didn't just condemn the lack of consultation, he identified the underlying disease. He described a world where great powers are monetizing their hegemony, essentially charging other countries for the privilege of accessing their markets. Think about that for a second. It's no longer about mutual trade. It's about demanding political concessions, dictating taxation rules, and forcing cultural policies on smaller nations just to keep the trade doors open. This is economic coercion disguised as globalization. Carney's message was simple: you cannot live within a lie of mutual benefit when that integration has become a tool for your own subordination. But talk is cheap, and what makes Carney's current global tour different is the sheer scale of the backup plan he is building. Before landing in Sydney, he was in New Delhi and the Middle East. He isn't just shaking hands. He is signing landmark agreements for the long-term supply of Canadian energy and critical minerals to power the world's fastest-growing democracies. This is the dense web of partnerships in action. By securing massive markets outside of North America, Canada is creating a shield. When your economy is deeply integrated with the world's rising powers, a tariff threat from a volatile neighbor loses its sting. In Australia, this strategy took another step forward. Carney is working to build what he calls ad hoc coalitions that work issue by issue. Think of this as a new operating system for the 21st century. Instead of one giant, slow-moving alliance, you have flexible groups of trusted democratic nations. By controlling the supply of lithium, uranium, and iron ore, middle powers are moving from being price takers to rule makers. They are ensuring that if the great powers decide to weaponize supply chains, the middle powers have the leverage to push back. This is the birth of what Carney calls collective sovereignty. In the old world, sovereignty was something you protected by building a fortress and staying isolated. In 2026, that is a recipe for poverty. True sovereignty now requires diversification. It means having so many high-level partnerships that no single country can dictate your future. It's about being respectful but not subservient. It's a diplomatic way of saying, we value the friendship, but we aren't waiting around for permission to prosper. We are watching the end of the privileged neighbor era for Canada. For a long time, Canada assumed that its geography and its membership in the inner circle of the U.S. alliance automatically guaranteed security. That assumption is now officially dead. The world has moved into a pick-your-poison era of geopolitics, where every integration comes with a risk of coercion. Carney's vision is to reject that binary choice. He is betting that by building a third path, Canada can lead a coalition of nations that still believe in rules, standards, and cooperation. The critics will say this is risky. They will argue that calling out the US while tensions are high is a dangerous game for a country like Canada. But the counter-argument is even more compelling. What is the risk of staying silent? If you allow your sovereignty to be eroded one tariff and one unconsulted military strike at a time, eventually you have nothing left to protect. By speaking openly at the Lowy Institute, Carney isn't just venting frustration. He is signaling to the rest of the world that Canada is open for a different kind of business, one based on trust and legitimacy rather than raw power and threats. The reaction to this move is already being felt globally. Leaders from across the world are inviting Carney to their capitals, not because Canada has the biggest military, but because it is offering a strategy for a world that feels increasingly chaotic. In a moment of rupture, clarity is the most valuable currency. Canada is moving to the center of the global stage as a convener, a country that can organize and build capacity through coalitions that deliver results at speed and scale. This is the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. It is a world of hard power, transactionalism, and crumbling institutions. But it is also a world of opportunity for those who are brave enough to diversify. The speech in Australia was a declaration of independence for a new century. It told the great powers that their leverage only works as long as the rest of the world remains dependent. And as of 2026, Canada and its allies are making sure that dependence is a thing of the past. The question for all of us now is whether this third path can actually hold. Can a group of middle powers really stand up to the gravitational pull of superpowers? Or is this just a temporary hedge against a volatile era? What is certain is that the illusion of the old world order has cracked, and Mark Carney is leading the charge to build something more resilient in its place. If you found this breakdown of the new global order insightful, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who need to hear this analysis. If you want to stay updated on every major move Canada makes on the world stage, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive. Tell me in the comments, do you think this middle power strategy is the right move, or are we risking too much by speaking so directly? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.